Hey everybody, hope you're doing well today. It's your boy Cyclical here, back with another Naruto discussion video. I'm pretty excited about today's discussion because, as I'm sure you saw from today's title, I'm going to be doing a breakdown of Itachi vs Pain. More specifically, I'll be covering living Itachi with his sickness still in play versus the six paths of pain who fought Sage Naruto. If you've already seen my Akatsuki ranking video, the link's down in the description by the way, then you already know who I think would come out on top, but I'm not going to spoil who I think would win just yet, so let's get right on into this. I think the first thing I need to do is give a general power scale of both of these characters, since it should be fairly obvious that if one of them is massively more powerful than the other, they should have a pretty serious advantage in this fight. So starting with physical power then, I'm first going to look at Pain. This is one of the more ambiguous aspects of this fight, since both Pain and Itachi rely more on their jutsu arsenals to do their fighting, but we do know that the Paths of Pain should be roughly strong enough to contend with Sage Mode Jiraiya in terms of physical strength. This is due to the feat we have from Pain where one of the paths is able to outright catch one of Jiraiya's punches while he's in Sage Mode. Outside of this singular showing, I really don't have much to go on in terms of concrete evidence, but I will point out that since the Paths of Pain, apart from the Diva Path, seemed incapable of handling Sage Naruto and Taijutsu, they're probably a little weaker than Sage Naruto is. Getting into the scaling we have for Itachi, I do have more than just one feat to go over. Itachi is shown being able to block swings from Samehada being swung at him by Killer Bee with only a kunai knife, and if you consider the cutscene from the Storm Games canon, he was able to do the same thing with Kisame using the blade. He was also able to keep up with KCM Naruto in hand-to-hand combat, and this is a feat I want to actually spend just a moment on because I think it actually has an element of definitiveness to it that the community may have missed up to this point. In his fight with KCM Naruto, he's able to keep up with all of Naruto's attacks and either block or dodge all of them. I've heard it said that this would make him faster than the Raikage, and I've also heard that Naruto probably wasn't going all out here, so Itachi isn't necessarily super fast due to this. I would argue, though, that this should mean he's somewhere in the middle of being super strong and fast, and not very impressive. On the one hand, I do agree that Naruto probably wasn't going on 100% here, but I think it's also equally fair to say that Naruto would have been fighting to subdue Itachi in this fight so that he could continue to question him about Sasuke without being in danger. Think about it. Why would Naruto allow Itachi to continue running around the battlefield and potentially use his techniques like Amaterasu and Tsukiyomi if he was capable of beating Itachi down to the point that he wouldn't have been a threat anymore? Especially since Nagato was also present on the same battlefield, I would think that both Naruto and Bee would want to eliminate the threat first and then continue questioning later. But they aren't able to do this, meaning that Itachi likely falls on a similar level of power to KCM Naruto and Killer Bee. You could argue for a little edge to either character here, but it should at least be relatively close. Of course, with all of that said, we actually don't see a clear advantage in terms of physical strength. Pain is certainly strong since he can contend with someone in Sage Mode, and Itachi can keep up with Naruto's Kurama Chakra Mode. Since we don't know whose feat is definitively more impressive, I would think it's fair to say that the two should be somewhat similar in terms of physical power. I'll also mention that physical strength is probably the least important factor in this fight, since both of them rely more on their jutsu to engage in combat. Both of their arsenals contain such strong techniques that their difference in striking or lifting power shouldn't really come up at all in a fight between the two of them. I'm going to take a moment and explain something that needs to be addressed, and this is why I'm using feats from the War Arc for Itachi in this discussion. In short, I think it's because Itachi's sickness shouldn't have actually weakened him all that much, at least not in terms of his physical attributes. Certainly it would have had a huge impact on his stamina, but even if he can't use his jutsu as extensively as he normally should be able to, this doesn't necessarily mean that he shouldn't be at least nearly as fast or strong as his regular strength and speed would be. Combine this with the fact that even while sick Itachi never went all out in a fight, and he doesn't seem to be going all out in the War Arc, I think it's fair to credit these feats to being within Itachi's realm of capability. Getting into the next aspect of scaling these two characters, we need to examine their speed. Now, speed is one of the more important factors of this fight. Like I laid out while discussing their strength, they both have incredibly dangerous techniques. Therefore, if one of these characters is fast enough to simply blitz the other, they probably win the fight without too much difficulty. Starting with Itachi this time, we first need to look at his fight against Sasuke. Sasuke at this point in the series is already a pretty fast fighter. In fact, he was so fast that Deidara flat out said that he couldn't keep up with Sasuke on the ground, and Deidara is someone who has pretty decent speed feats, even among the Kage level fighters. Itachi was able to keep up with this same Sasuke with ease, and was even able to keep Sasuke struggling throughout almost the entire fight. Looking again at the War Arc feat I mentioned earlier, Itachi was also capable of keeping up with KCM Naruto and Killer Bee in a physical scuffle. And while you could once again argue either way on who should be faster here, Itachi should at least be on a similar tier of speed to both of these two at this point, although it does seem like he's outpacing Bee. And I know this doesn't affect his actual physical speed, but Itachi does have the Sharingan's ability to help him read his opponent's movements. And this should allow him to make up for a speed deficit, granted it isn't too great for him to overcome in the first place. Moving into Pain, we have a little less straightforward path to figuring out how fast he is. I'd be glad to use Nagato's feats from the War Arc here, just like I did for Itachi, but I feel like I can't really do this in Pain's case, since most people, myself included, think that Nagato is stronger than the Paths of Pain. Since I can't use the KCM Naruto scale for Pain, I'm forced to look at other characters. Fortunately, I don't need to look far away, since I can use a different version of Naruto for Pain's scaling. Sage Naruto is also one of the faster characters we see in the entire series, and during the War Arc, this Naruto proves that he's fast enough in Sage mode to intercept a full-speed attack from the Third Raikage and successfully counter it at the same time. This is really good for Pain, since he was able to somewhat keep up with Sage Naruto in their fight against each other. Unfortunately, Naruto did seem to have a pretty clear advantage in terms of speed, and if you go and examine the fight, you realize most of the Paths of Pain simply can't keep up with Sage Naruto as he knocks them all down without much effort. The only one that seems to even be able to react to him are the Preta Path and the Diva Path, and it's only during the times that Naruto has exhausted his Sage mode that the Paths of Pain are able to apply real pressure to him. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention something major here though. The Diva Path was out of power for most of the duration of the fight against Naruto. On top of this, it's fair to claim that since he'd used up a lot of his chakra using the chaotic Shinra Tensei, he should be a bit slower than normal. Just like Itachi's sickness, this is completely unquantifiable, but it does seem pretty likely. Then when the Diva Path gets its powers back, it's capable of keeping up with the six-tailed cloak of the Nine-Tails Naruto. Once again, he's on the back foot here, but at least he's not getting totally washed in terms of speed. As far as physical attributes go, I think I can stop here since durability really doesn't matter much in this fight. Both Itachi and Pain are able to output major damage in a very short time, so I think a solid few hits to either fighter here will probably put them out of commission. I'll quickly recap what I've gone over here though. In terms of physical strength, the two seem somewhat relative. Of course, in Pain's case, the Diva Path seems to be the strongest and fastest overall. And using War Arc scaling for Itachi, you could easily argue he should be stronger than the Paths of Pain, but due to the unclear nerf in his strength from his sickness, I'll put them on a roughly equal footing here. In terms of speed, the same situation seems to be true, in that you can argue Itachi may be a bit faster since he seems to keep up better with the faster opponent. Of course, due to his sickness and Pain's exhaustion, you could very well argue that they should be relative in speed as well. I'm going to take the stance that they are relative from this point forward, with a slight edge being given to Itachi for two reasons. The first is that, based on the feats we have for him, this seems likely to be the case, and the second is that it makes the fight more interesting because Itachi having a slight edge in speed helps him compensate for the fact that he'll be fighting against 6 people at once in this fight. The last thing I need to go over before getting into a fight between Pain and Itachi is intel. The reason I bring this up is that Pain should have a good deal of intel about Itachi's abilities. He is the leader of the Akatsuki after all, and Obito advises him about things, so he should have a good knowledge base about the group's members. On top of this, the Sharingan is a pretty well-known technique, and what it's capable of doing seems to be fairly well known as well. It's possible that Pain wouldn't know what Itachi's Mangekyo jutsu are, but I think it's also perfectly reasonable to assume that he might at least know the basics of what Tsukuyomi and Amaterasu are. I don't think he'd really know about the Susanoo, but even if he does know about the Susanoo itself, he shouldn't know about the Totsuka Blade and the Yata, since even Zetsu seemed surprised that Itachi had them, and Itachi only pulled them out in the last fight of his entire life. Since Itachi hasn't died yet in this scenario, not even Zetsu should know that Itachi has these weapons, and by extension, Pain won't know as well. On Itachi's side of things, I think this is an area in which Pain has the clear advantage. Itachi is stated to have done extensive research into all aspects of ninjutsu and lore while he was alive, so it's likely he's at least heard of the Rinnegan. We can safely assume this is the case since he's read the Uchiha Stone Tablet with the Mangekyo Sharingan, after all. This knowledge of the Rinnegan may even extend to knowing the general requirements to activating it, that being having both Uchiha and Senju DNA. I don't think that Itachi would know what the abilities are of the Rinnegan, though. This is because of the fact that in his fight against Nagato, Itachi had to ask Naruto what was happening when Nagato used the planetary devastation. This would likely mean that Itachi shouldn't know the other specific techniques of the Rinnegan, and he'll have to figure them out as he goes. I'm not going to explain the techniques that Pain and Itachi have in this video. I think there are other YouTubers who have made excellent videos about what the two of them are capable of, so I'm just going to save myself the time of breaking down what each individual jutsu does and get right into the fight itself. I think breaking down a fight between these two characters is tricky since both can respond to the abilities of the other in so many unique ways. Because of how many possibilities are present in this situation, I'm going to present a scenario for what I believe would most likely happen in a fight between the two. From this point on, I want to make it clear that this will essentially be my own headcanon of what happens, but I do want to establish that I do think this is a perfectly likely outcome to a fight between the two. If you think anything I've said already or anything I say from here on sounds like total cap, please leave me a comment with your own thoughts on things, but I will also encourage you to hear me out until the end since I am trying my absolute hardest to incorporate every aspect of these two characters. So from this point on, this is what I think would happen if Kishimoto were to sit down and write a fight between the two characters. So first things first, we need to set up why this fight takes place. Since we're using the 6 paths of pain and living Itachi here, this has to take place sometime before Itachi and Sasuke have their fight. The most narratively justifiable reason I can think of to have the two fight is that Obito, not wanting to get his own hands dirty or take the risk of fighting Itachi himself, reports to Pain that Itachi is a traitor to the Akatsuki who's been spying for the Leaf Village. Itachi's obviously a threat to the organization and its goals, so Pain agrees to go deal with the problem. Before he leaves, I can easily see Obito giving a brief summary of what Itachi is capable of doing, and tells him that Itachi is likely hiding in the old Uchiha hideout and how to get there. Pain then departs for his mission and eventually comes to the Uchiha hideout. Itachi, unaware that he is being hunted by the leader of the Akatsuki, is probably lounging around on the roof of the Uchiha hideout when one of the paths of pain, probably the Ashura path, walks up behind Itachi and attempts to sneak attack him, along with a line something like, "You're a traitor to the Akatsuki. Die." The Ashura path then throws a super hard punch at Itachi that he narrowly avoids. The Ashura's path fist subsequently blows a hole in the roof of the hideout instead. Itachi, now instantly battle-ready, jumps down this hole into the hideout and prepares to fight the enemy. Following shortly behind, the Ashura path and the rest of the 6 paths of pain jump down into the hideout. Not wasting any time for explanations or banter, Itachi and Pain make the first move of the fight simultaneously. The animal path now steps forward and summons the rhinoceros to charge Itachi down, while the Ashura path and human path also rush forward to engage. Itachi, being the tactical fighter that he is, first throws out a fireball jutsu to act as a smokescreen of sorts, and follows this with a flurry of shuriken. Most of these shuriken fly into the fireball and catch flame, similar to what he did against Killer Bee. Obviously no threat to the paths of pain or the summon, they all avoid the main barrage, but it's likely that Itachi probably also throws just a couple more shuriken out of the main path to arc in and catch the animal path unaware, being very careful to make sure that these stay out of the animal path's field of vision. At this time, he also switches out his true body by casting a clone jutsu. The animal path, aided by the shared vision of the other paths, dodges these two with little effort. It's at this point that Itachi has probably already noticed a few things. He's already seen that he's confronted by 6 opponents, all of which possess the Rinnegan. This is odd to Itachi since he knows that this jutsu is supposed to be extraordinarily rare. He also notes that they stand in a particular formation, with several of them taking positions at the front for a direct assault, while a few of the others hang back, likely for defensive or support purposes. The last thing that Itachi has already observed is that they are capable of dodging attacks that they shouldn't be able to see. While he reflects on this, his clone continues to battle the 3 paths of pain that rushed forward earlier. It isn't long before the clone is destroyed and Itachi is forced to come out of hiding. Itachi, now very cautious of what the pains can do, decides to test the water with genjutsu and manages to catch 1 or 2 of the paths he was just fighting in a genjutsu. Immediately, he launches a fireball at the Ashura path and some shuriken at the human path. This is where the Preta path steps in and absorbs the fireball, while the animal path breaks the Ashura path out of the genjutsu. The human path, left temporarily unprotected, goes down to Itachi's shuriken in this exchange. The paths of pain again take the offensive, with the animal path now summoning the Chimera dog and the Ashura path launching a few missiles at Itachi. Itachi likely hits the missiles with shuriken to counter them, but either takes a glancing blow or just narrowly avoids being bitten by the Chimera dog. While Itachi is distracted by his assailants, the Preta path brings the human path's body to the Naraka path, who proceeds to revive it. Itachi doesn't see this occurring due to being on the defensive against his other opponents. A moment later, Itachi is just about to land a hit on the Ashura path when the human path intercepts and punches Itachi out of the way. Itachi's confused by this since he was sure he had just taken this path down. He instantly comes to the conclusion that one of them has the ability to revive the others since they all seem to have one main ability each. He's probably smart enough to figure out that there was one enemy hanging at the very back of the pack, and it's likely that this is the one with the revival power. It's also likely that by this time that Itachi has figured out that the paths of pain share a field of vision. No time to dwell on this though, since he is being pressured by 4 paths of pain at once now. The Diva path still hasn't seen fit to step in yet, since only 1 path of pain has gone down and was easily revived. He can instead sit back and keep his powers in reserve for a crucial moment in the fight. Itachi, feeling the full pressure of 4 strong opponents, cannot afford a lengthy fight and activates his Mangekyou Sharingan. The Pains notice this, of course, but it isn't sure exactly which jutsu to expect coming. It's likely not Tsukiyomi since the numbers are not to Itachi's advantage, but whether Susanoo or Amaterasu is coming is up in the air. Before there's even time to finish exploring the question, a black flame ignites on the Chimera dog as Itachi activates the Amaterasu. He quickly pans his vision around the opponents attacking him and manages to catch all 4 of them in the deadly flames, just as a strange force starts to pull him to the side. The Diva path, now forced to act, intervenes and uses the Bancho Tenin to pull Itachi toward him with one of the Rinnegan rods outstretched, ready to impale his opponent upon arrival. Itachi's nimble enough to avoid a fatal blow, but he's injured nonetheless. What's more, his chakra is now being suppressed somehow, and he can see that the Preta path has begun sucking away the black flames of the Amaterasu. With no options left and his death before his very eyes, Itachi uses his trump card, the crow with Shisui's eye. He's able to summon this out and will it to cast Kodo Matsukami on the Diva path, commanding him to help Itachi fight his enemies. Just as the Preta path comes to its feet, the Diva path then pulls the Rinnegan rod out of Itachi's torcho, which prompts Nagato to immediately turn off control of the Diva path's body to counter the strange genjutsu that's been cast on it. The Preta path closes on Itachi, who's still reeling from this last attack, and catches Itachi in a hold to start draining what's left of his chakra. Now in serious danger, Itachi's forced to use his final trump card in his arsenal. The Susanoo springs forth, impaling the Preta path with the Totsuka blade immediately upon its appearance. The Diva path, though, has just stood back up and the Naraka path is still completely unscathed. Itachi attempts to swing the Totsuka blade at the Diva path, but is repelled when Pain uses the Shinra Tensei to deflect the blow. What's more, this may even cause the Totsuka blade to be dispelled. Itachi takes a tactical retreat to get a bit of breathing room, and the Diva Path and Naraka Path stand ready to enter the final stretch of the battle. Itachi finds himself again being pulled off of his feet as the Diva Path again uses the Banso Tenin to pull Itachi into the waiting assault of the Naraka Path, who intends to use the King of Hell's ability to pull Itachi's tongue from his mouth. Itachi, not completely blindsided by the technique this time, substitutes out with his crows to avoid the waiting death trap. He again summons the Susanoo and attacks the Naraka Path with the Totsuka blade, destroying it in a single blow. He's noticed that the last Path of Pain did not intervene this time for whatever reason. The Diva Path begins to attempt to flee so that he can use the Chibaku Tensei, but Itachi follows behind, knowing that he can't let the leader of the Akatsuki escape now that he's been discovered as a spy. A chase ensues, Itachi barely being able to keep up due to his injuries. Eventually, the Diva Path manages to gain some distance from Itachi and stares him dead in the eyes as he releases a small black orb from the palm of his hand. Before Itachi can react, rocks, trees, and earth begin to fall upwards towards this black sphere. It's all Itachi can do not to get caught by the ascending piece of debris as he is... It's all Itachi can do not to get caught by an ascending piece of debris as he is helplessly sucked to the center of the coalescing planetoid up above. He is soon buried, and Pain thinks for a moment that he's won. This is until the planetoid created by the Chibaku Tensei morphs into the shape of an eyeball with the Sharingan gaze directed precisely at Pain. Pain and the world around him seem to shrink and fall away into nothingness as Itachi manifests in a giant form before Pain, immediately igniting Pain with the flames of hell itself. Pain starts to scream before coming back to his senses in the real world again. He was just subject to an illusion that lasted only a brief moment, but as he comes more aware of himself once more, he finds that he's been run through by multiple of Itachi's kunai and shuriken before Itachi delivers a final blow, sending the Diva Path to a bitter end. This battle was not without its cost, however, as Itachi, now completely exhausted of his chakra and injured from several attacks from his opponent, leaves him gasping from pain and gasping to catch his breath. He may have realized that someone was remotely controlling these 6 bodies, but by now it's far too late. The damage and exertion done to Itachi's body mean that he'll never recover enough to fight again. At best, he survives a few more days before his illness finally takes him. As you can see, I think this was an extraordinarily close fight, and in fact I think there's an almost endless set of variation in how this fight could go. It took me days to come up with this scenario that contains, in my opinion, the most likely series of events. And once again, if you think this fight would go another way, I'd love to hear your thoughts in a comment down below. I want to take just a moment and conclude with a few more remarks and observations I have about this matchup. In terms of the arsenal, both have some extremely deadly moves, but I think it's easier for Itachi to use the entirety of his arsenal than Pain. This is because in the case of Pain's trump cards, some conditions need to be met before he can activate the strongest of his jutsu. The chaotic Shinra Tensei has to be used a good distance away from the other Pains or he risks damaging his other bodies, and he also needs to draw all of the power he can into the Diva Path to do this, which leaves the other paths of Pain defenseless. In a fight against someone as strong as Itachi, he simply doesn't have a chance to do this since he needs the extra pressure from the other paths of Pain throughout as much of the fight as possible. With the Chibaku Tensei, Pain again needs time and distance to activate this jutsu, something he doesn't have the luxury of with an opponent like Itachi. If he attempts to flee, Itachi's fast enough to keep up with him and prevent him from using this jutsu. And this also does a lot of damage to the surrounding area, so he can't use this jutsu if the other paths of Pain are still around or if this fight takes place in the Rain Village. One of the things that makes this a very difficult fight for Itachi is that he simply doesn't have the endurance to win a stamina battle against Pain. No matter how you slice it, Pain's stamina feats far outshine Itachi's, and so Itachi is forced to get clever and use his strong attacks sparingly and at the right time to get maximum effect from them. As you can see from the scenario I laid out, I think he's capable of doing so, but there are about 1,000 times during this fight that if Itachi had done the wrong move or Pain had been ready for what Itachi did next, it would probably have cost him the fight. As you can also see though, I didn't afford Itachi any more stamina than what he used in the fight against Sasuke, so I clearly think it's possible for him to take the win despite having inferior endurance. The determining factor in this battle for me was the fact that I have to recognize that Itachi is likely physically superior to any of the Paths of Pain. Like I mentioned at the start of this video, they are in a relatively similar realm of strength and speed, but Itachi being able to keep up with the Paths of Pain and read their moves with his Sharingan should be enough to offset the numbers advantage that Pain has. All in all, I think Itachi is more likely to win due to having a slight physical advantage and having jutsu at his disposal that are easier to employ in a fight like this. If I had to guess what the odds are of this outcome, I'd say that Itachi probably wins 55 to 60 times out of 100. It truly is that close of a fight in my opinion. If you've stuck around this far into the video, thank you so much. I really wanted to cover this fight since it includes two of my favorite characters with some of my favorite moves in the entire series. It was also super fun to challenge myself to find an honest breakdown of how the interactions between their abilities would work. I also wanted to try to paint a solid mental picture of how a fight would go between the two characters, so please let me know what you thought of this approach to a versus battle. If all of you seem to like it, I'll probably do it again in the future. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed today's video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Until then, stay safe, have a great day, and goodbye.